Hey guys, it's Kate and I hope you're having a great day. I'm here with video 2 of my watercolor tutorials and watercolor techniques series, and this one's going to cover dry brushing and scumbling. So dry brushing is basically just like it sounds. You are painting with a dry brush, and it could be caked with paint or just a very light wash, but basically you are making marks that's going to be texture on your paper. These are some examples of dry brushing, and we'll do that together today. This is what you normally get with more solid color, and dry brushing can leave a really wonderful texture on your papers. And this really comes in handy for things like when you're doing grasses or tree trunks or rocks and all kinds of different things where you have texture and you want to show that with some contrasting color. So one of the easiest brushes for me to do dry brushing with is a fan brush. And so fan brushes come in different thicknesses. Mine is very thin. You can see it right here. It does not have a lot of bristles, which makes it ideal because it really just doesn't hold very much water. Even if I just dab it lightly, I can put it in some paint here and dry brush pretty easily with that. And you can see it just goes right down. And it's actually great for things like grass. So if I wanted to dip into, let's say, this sap green in my palette, and I can take it right out of the pan, and let's say I want to put in some grasses in here, I can do that. And there we have some texture on my little landscape. Now, you can do that with all sorts of different things, and you can also paint on its side. So if I want to dip in here again, I can do some really neat little hash marks with this brush. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see a close-up there. And then same thing with these grasses. Now, it's not very artistic, but this is just demonstrating the technique itself so you can see how it looks. Now, one of the challenging things with dry brushing is if you're using any kind of round brush. I've got my quill brush here, which is very large and holds a ton of water. This is my sort of medium size round. It's a number 10. And then I also have a number 6, and this is also a round brush here. If you're working on a large piece, a thicker brush could work. If you're working on a smaller piece, you want to go as small as you can to hold the least amount of water for your artwork. Now, that being said, you can be successful with a round brush by following a couple of different techniques. One is obviously the drier the better, but the way a round brush is designed is for the water and paint to flow from the tip. And so even when your brush feels pretty dry and it's not dripping with water, it's still going to release a lot of paint if you're painting with your tip. The nice thing is the more you're on your belly, which is the side of your brush, the less water will be released when you paint. So if you're actually making scrubbing motions with the side of your brush, that is a great dry brushing technique. So if you have, let's say, a pre-mixed color like this, let's just say I had mixed a few colors in my palette, and normally when you're doing a mix, it's pretty wet. Now, if I were to come in, even with a wetter brush, if I'm on the belly, it's going to be a lot easier to do a dry brushing technique. My brush is saturated. If I paint on my tip right here, I'm going to get perfectly dark lines. And I can keep painting because I have plenty of water in my brush, but I can control that by going onto my belly. And the more I move up, the more water is released. So I can start here, keep going out, and then keep going up, and it will add more and more paint and water to my paper. And I still have plenty. I could paint with this brush for a long time. Now, another kind of brush that's great for dry brushing techniques is a flat brush. It's also a thin brush, but if you need to make more controlled lines and hard edges, it's a great choice. So I've got it dipped in my water and blotted on my paper towel a bit. I'm going to pick up some of this paint that I have in my palette. I'm just going to grab myself a little piece of paper here and show you a couple of examples real quick. So if I am on my tip, I can make that solid line. The more I'm on my side, the more dry brush like it's going to be. And the more I do it and the drier it is, the more texture I will get. And also your speed works too. So if I go fast, I barely leave a mark at all, except where I'm kind of pressing at the beginning and the end. If I move slower, it's going to leave more color. And I'm on the belly of my brush pretty much through this. If I'm on the tip, there's my solid line again. I don't have that break. Now, if I'm on my tip and I move quickly, I'm going to get some more color, but you'll see a little bit of that dry brushing. Just like that. Now, another way that dry brushing can be really nice is if you're adding texture to something else. Like let's say I've done a flower, and this is actually a good example of that, where let's say I had this as the center of my flower, and this is just texture and the petals kind of radiating out from that. And I could have painted petals here, which would look really neat and almost realistic. But I'll kind of do a little example of one here. So I did this flower petal, and this is dry, so I'll be able to do it. Now I'm using my smaller round brush. It's blotted. I'm going to dip into this darker purple color over here. And I'm just going to get some out into my tray. And I'm even going to blot my brush a little bit. Now, if I wanted to come in here with my small brush and add some texture to my flower petal, I can do that. And I can move further up to my tip if I want to really get that color concentrated at the bottom. But if I use my belly, it's just going to be a nice look. Now, when you're talking about scumbling is a lot like dry brush, and in fact it can be used interchangeably with dry brush. But I also like to use that term to describe sort of random marks with your brush, and this is a good example of that. I would call this scumbling, even though it's with a pretty wet brush, because it is leaving a texture on the page. And so I have this little simple tree here, but if it's just one color for the leaves, there's not really a lot of interest going on. So one thing you can do is scumble. And so if I wanted to grab, let's say, a darker color green and maybe make that with a bit of Payne's gray mixed in. That way I can put in some shadows on my tree. And I'm going to work with a wet brush, but I'm just going to do those random marks. And let's say I just want to go over the color that I had already. And so I'll get kind of like this two-tone look. And I can move that out throughout the tree, add some texture there, and I'm just kind of moving my brush randomly through the tree. I can add some deeper color down here and maybe add another shadow here. And all of a sudden, your tree starts to have shape because you're adding shadows to different areas. Now, let's say I wanted to even add some more color. Let's say I want to do green and maybe mix in a little bit of yellow ochre and make this sort of nicer yellowish green here and add some of that. I can do that too. And this is great for just adding that texture and extra interest on your landscape paintings. And so already, even though we have only spent a minute on this, we have a lot of interest going on here. So scumbling is just great. I mean, imagine if this was a gray rock and I wanted to put some Payne's gray on that to darken up some spots, like you have those spots on your rock. That's a great way to do it too. Now I'm going to grab my quill brush, which is a really fat, wet brush. And I'm going to come in here with some water and make this really wet. You can do dry brushing with this too. If I wanted to come in, get a good amount of paint on here, I can do it. And I can cover a lot of landscape with this. And I can layer colors. Let's say I wanted to add some green to that. And I'm just going to give it a quick dab, but I can do green. And I'm staying on the belly of my brush. The second I come up to the tip, I'm letting out a lot more water, even though I've squeezed it out pretty much. Now, if I want to go fast, I'm going to have better luck. But it's all about control of your brush. So I hope this video was really helpful for you today and just showed you a few different things, but there's 3 things to remember. 1, the drier the brush, the better for dry brush techniques. 2, if you're using a brush that holds a lot of water, sticking with the belly of it will help you get that texture even if there's a lot of water in your brush. And 3, your speed will make a big difference. So just keep those things in mind and keep practicing with your brush strokes, and you'll be able to add a lot of texture to your different artworks. And I'll give you a close-up of this so you can see the different things that you can do here and the different marks that we've made together with different brushes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up so more people can see it. And if you want to see more like this, consider subscribing to my channel. I'm planning on releasing 30 videos in this series of tutorials, each covering a different watercolor technique. So you'll want to make sure to subscribe to stick around and see more. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep creating.